like you to put your thinking caps on, would like you to think about your own societies and organizations and how these will impact you guys and your daily lives, and what we can do collectively to work things in a positive direction. So we're going to be looking at the UN World Citizens Initiative, the UN Parliamentary Assembly, the formation of a UN Civil Society Envoy, and a UN Special Rapporteur on Democracy. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Nudar.
Processes with their civic society, but we recognize that civil space is shrinking across the world, and I'm sure Mandeep will point this out to us as well in all the work Civicus has been doing to track this. But I think we need to recognize that globally our problems are far more connected. A fire in one country makes people cough in another. A pandemic in one country sort of detriments supply chains in other parts of the world, and we've seen that wars in different regions, and I want to point out that there are wars in different regions, affect sort of global supply and demand.
Technology and I have a sorry? We just have a little tech issue. Just give us a thumbs up when we can. Thank you. It's okay, it's a people's assembly. We're not as worried as the people across the street. Do we try speaking? That doesn't resonate as much with it, no. Can you hear me okay? Can I just speak? Can I just speak? Yeah, that's How are you doing, Joe?
Excellent. Excellent.
Welcome to our new guest joining us in the room. How's that sign sheet coming along, actually? Passing its way around. There we go. All right, another sound check. I haven't heard my voice again. That's good sign. Okay, can you hear?
Recording in progress.
No, it sounds on. No, it sounds on. Okay, welcome to get online as well for joining us. Thank you for joining. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Thank you so much. I don't actually need to do
We need the mic for the Zoom. People is online. Give me a second. Oh, good. Okay. Can you try? No. This is for the mic. Hold on, she's coming. Hold on. Oh, hold on. Can you pass me the mic, please? The microphone? Yeah.
Hi. You should unmute the microphone on that spotlight rolling out. Spotlight my video. And then also we'll put the sound on it. And then just remove sound from this one. Leave audio on this one. Yeah, what's the issue?
The sound is echoing.
Probably because you connect to sound on multiple places. So
Yes.
leave the audio on this one. And then enable the audio on the other computer that's in front of them.
No. The
No,
audio
no.
you need from
Yeah.
here, not from
Okay,
there.
really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
fine.
can you
we
please
left
leave?
the audio on?
You left the audio?
Yeah.
You're the only audio here?
Yes.
And I have echo? Can
Yeah.
I listen to echo?
Yeah. I already
One, two, three.
Okay, HDMI is disconnected. Nothing different happened, right?
No.
I'm sorry for this issue. Osman Diallo, is you, is here. Everybody else
Oh,
muted.
muting me? Hold on.
When did it start?
One, two, three. Okay, little. Oh, I think we're good now, guys. Okay, this is working better. Yeah, it's okay. Interpreters, can you hear me? Up. The echo is off. Can you let me know if the sound is good enough for you? It's muffed. Okay, it's not working better. Hold on a second. How is that for you guys? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that any better for you guys? Can you please give me an answer?
Yeah, it's good. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. Participants, please don't allow audio. Il y en a qui me comprennent ici en français. Il y a des francophones dans la salle? Ouais. Eh bien, connectez-vous sur Zoom. Vous pouvez écouter l'interprétation en français. Hein? Donc, vous rejoignez le lien de la salle en ce moment. Vous pouvez l'avoir sur le programme. Et on a des super interprètes qui sont en train de taffer là-bas sur Zoom. Ils vous attendent. Si vous avez mauvaise connexion, vous allez voir Fatou juste là-bas. Elle va vous donner un meilleur Wi-Fi. C'est pour l'interprétation, hein, le Wi-Fi. Oh, OK. ¿Alguien habla español? ¿Español? ¿Sí? Interpretación? Good, because I can't say anything else. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I think we've lost the Zoom. Oh no, they're reconnecting. Okay. Keep doing that. Okay. Great. Great idea. Yeah. Great. Thank you for the tech support. So, take 3. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Going to pass the mic back to Nodara.
Thanks so much. I'm not going to repeat what I already said. Same people in the room. But I just want to say, so having said that our problems are connected, and this is why we think that it's not just about what comes in through the member states, but also about what's happening with the citizens on the ground up. The key thing to highlight is that it's a question of ownership, right? With this UN World Citizens Initiative, I think one of the things that we as civil society really need to be thinking about as we push this through and try to get it implemented is this does need to be owned collectively by folks in middle income countries. This can't come from the global north as sort of like, this is what we want to do. I think that that's an important part of the model. I think that it's about increasing access of the United Nations agenda to folks that don't currently have access. So this is not an initiative to say, hey, the people in this room, we should have a way to like increase our visibility at the United Nations. That's not what this is about. It's about the people who are not in this room and couldn't make it here. So I think that's an important thing to realize as well. And finally, I think what we want to say in addition is with this UN World Citizens Initiative, it's about recognizing that, and I want to almost cite something that Paul mentioned in a panel earlier this weekend, or last weekend, was that there is a global south in the global north and a global north in the global south. And intersectionally, we all have positions of privilege and advantage. I am a woman of color, but you can hear my British accent, right? So I am privileged in some situations and I'm disadvantaged in others. And I think part of recognizing ourselves as world citizens and seeing this World Citizens Initiative is celebrating that intersectionality, realizing that the agendas we put forward are not going to be homogenous in different spaces, and we need to find ways to account for that. Secondly, this UN Special Rapporteur on democracy initiative that Rita mentioned, just to elaborate on that a little bit. So democratic rights are expressed in various ways in a variety of UN resolutions. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward, both from the SDG summits and into over the next year, the summits of the future. A lot of what we're talking about right now has already been agreed on. Language exists. We just need to find ways to operationalize and mechanize that language in different ways. So democratic rights have already been expressed by the UN, but we're seeing increasingly that these democratic rights are not being recognized in ways that they should be. So civil society has a role in helping to correctly set up the mandate of a special rapporteur on democracy. I think that's going to be crucially important. And when we say democracy, I think it's very important to make clear that we don't mean a model of democracy taken from a specific country. I think we don't mean sort of a Western exported model of democracy either. I think it is a civic model of democracy. I think it is a participatory model of democracy. And I think crucially, it is the principles that underlie intrinsically and instrumentally democratic institutions. So it's the idea that you can dissent. It's the idea that you have a right to live free of violence. It's the idea that you have the right to recognize your constitutions and hold your governments accountable to them. So, or even dissent against those constitutions that might in essence be discriminatory to particular groups. So I think this is what this initiative is calling for. And just very quickly, if you'll allow me, Rita, is to ground these ideas in the idea of development, because we're here on the sidelines of the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, is one of my favorite writers of development is Amartya Sen. I've looked up to his writing for a very long time, so excuse maybe my economic bias here. But he defines development as freedom, right? It's the idea that you are able to freely call for your rights. It's the idea that development gives you choice, whereas those who are less developed don't necessarily have that agency. And I think both of these initiatives are really about giving people agency who don't currently have it and having champions to support that agency. And critically, especially with the World Citizens Initiative, you're not going to be able to track whether you're making a difference if you're not able to measure it. And I think that part of what the World Citizens Initiative provides is some level of being able to quantify support around agendas, some level of being able to provide evidence that this is what different, recognizing that globally as civil society, and as you can see across this room, we are not one homogeneous entity, and we need to account for the differences that exist between us as well. I will stop there and pass over to Joe Linen, former member of European Parliament and former president of the Union of European Federalists, to also introduce the UN Parliamentary Assembly Initiative. Joe.
Yeah, Nudara, great to be here. And I think you are all very optimistic people. Otherwise, you would not come to that session that we can democratize the United Nations. Now, good, we haven't changed the Security Council. Why not to work on long-term issues that are good ideas, and good ideas always need the moment where they can be fulfilled. And I think democratization of the UN is a good idea that will, in the course of the next years, definitely get strength and has to be as well in a way implemented. Now, the Charter of the United Nations starts with "We the Peoples," as you know. And if you look at the debates in 45, the mothers and fathers of the UN Charter have been much more ambitious than the text later on. They wanted to have a direct involvement of the citizens. There was an enthusiasm that people of the world could shape the world after the disaster of the Second World War. But unfortunately, the Soviet Union blocked any attempt to have citizens' direct or indirect participation. So what we got is what we have today. A United Nations represented by governments. And that is neither inclusive, nor efficient, nor transparent, nor has it a real democratic legitimacy. Let's be blunt. But I had a chance to serve in the European Parliament and saw how as well an after-war creation of governments have evolved to more and more imply citizens by a European Citizens Initiative since 10 years, by a parliamentary assembly that was purely consultative for many years, but then pressure got more and more to have them directly elected. And we are now going for the next European elections in June next year. And already today, if you look in our media, they are all intrigued. Who are the candidates? Will be the outcome? Will the left, the right, or who will win? So there is a huge growing interest in that transnational, international entity called European Union. And my dream, and I hope your dream is as well, that in the course of the next decade, the next years, the moment will come where we can connect the UN, the one world community, to the citizens of the world, directly or indirectly. And we work with the institutions of the 23rd century that are not fit for the expectations and the challenges of the 21st century. And the civil society has such an enormous power, but it has to be somehow materialized in structures and in instruments where we can participate in creating public opinion worldwide in the decision-making process. So what we propose, and I have wrote a book with Andreas Bummel some years ago about the World Parliament, and it's actually translated in Japanese, in Chinese, in Russian, and nearly in Spanish as well. We have 450 NGOs behind, nearly 2,000 legislators, and there is a growing support to have a bicameral system in the UN. A Chamber of States, which is the General Assembly, and then the new element, a Chamber of Citizens, which would be the World Parliamentary Assembly. Yeah, it's a fresh idea, and I think the UN needs fresh ideas. It needs a new dynamic, and you could see it today when I came here in the church center, listening already to previous meetings in the morning. I said the citizens of the world are quickly united. What is necessary? This side, we are united. On the other side, the governments of the world are not united because they are not sincere. They are working with second thoughts, third thoughts, with tactics and power games, and they are failing. A clear failure in many of existential issues. And therefore, I think we have to empower the citizens to be more involved and have their equal say at the end in the decision-making process. Now, good, World Parliament Assembly, how would that look like? There are many studies how it could function. Assembly. I think it would have somehow less than 1,000 members, otherwise it would not be workable. It would work on the degressive proportionality, as to say that bigger states have less compared to their population, and small states have more. And what we want inclusiveness, not only members for the governmental majority, but as well for the minorities in the states. And that would give a complete other picture in such an assembly, because many governments are not speaking for their people, as we know. Yeah? They are claiming to speak for their people, but they don't do. And half, let's say, always is, let's say, involved, because they are so-called opposition here, and they are not there. They are away. And therefore, I think that would be a real fresh new element. The charm is that we could create it by two ways. The one is without charter reform under Article 22. The General Assembly, by a majority vote, establish a subsidiary body, as we have with the UNRod. So why not do it that over there is a majority to create a parliamentary assembly. The other would be, and there is a whole day tomorrow, to engage Article 109, because when they went away from the charter formulation, they have been dissatisfied. Let's see that many delegates have been frustrated at all that you had to veto in the Security Council, you had no citizen participation. And Article 109 of the Charter is saying at the latest 10 years after the inauguration of the Charter, there will be a review conference for changing. It never happened, but maybe it can happen. And then, of course, that would be the other itinerary to have introduction of a parliamentary chamber. But the 22 would be easier. It would be done any time in the next years that critical mass of governments would create a caucus, and then create a caucus, and then would, let's say, put it on the agenda. And yes, I have seen this idea has a lot of charm in developing countries, because it would give a voice to many people that have no voice here and in Geneva. It would really be more inclusive. And the Indian Parliament, the African Parliament, the Latin American Parliament, they all have endorsed a resolution to create a parliamentary assembly in the UN. Now, I think that quickly in that assembly, there would be, like in all parliaments, by affinity of political ambition, would create, let's say, groups, parliamentary groups. Yeah, we would have committees on big issues, and it could start as a consultative body, either by delegation of members from the national parliaments according to the strengths of political formations, or if a country wants, immediately by direct election. I think there would be, among 192 countries, there would be the one or the other who would have electing their member to this World Parliament directly. Okay, I don't want to be too long. I think this is a great idea, And it will get strength more and more. And I'm pretty optimistic that by the end of this decade, something will happen to restructure the architecture of the UN, which is so, let's say, out of time, so unfit for purpose, and giving citizens this right by their elected representatives to have an equal say. I think it's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Now I'd like to bring up our next speaker, Mandeep Tawana, who leads Civicus, and he's going to tell us some introduction, really, of the UN civil society and also the proposal and the Unmute campaign as well. So over to you, Mandeep.
Thank you so much, and warm hello to everybody, and good to see so many friends and partners and others who have been for the first time here. So I'm going to speak about the Civil Society Envoy to begin with, and the Civil Society Envoy proposal is something that is very much part of the We the People supports along with the UN World Citizens Initiative that we spoke about in Dhara, along with the IW Parliament we spoke about Joe. And is one of the 3 initiatives there. It's also one of the 5 initiatives in the Unmute Civil Society Initiative, which is supported by 52 states. Now, Nadhara, you said a very interesting thing at the beginning of this conversation. We talked about civic space restrictions. In our work at Civicus, not a day goes by when we don't hear about a civil society colleague who's exposing corruption, who's exposing serious human rights violations, who's trying to seek economic, social, or political change in their countries about not being persecuted. Some of them have false cases registered against them. Some of their organizations have been deregistered. Some of them have impediments to get funding both domestically and internationally from them. So these are very challenging times for civic space. In fact, we are going to be talking about the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, but those who can be partners of the UN and of states in achieving the goals are facing huge restrictions. So within this context, what is happening in many different countries around the world is also being reflected at the UN. So civil society organizations find that oftentimes are space. The bigger organizations that are based in New York, that have the so-called cultural capital to be here, that have the resources to be here, they don't have a problem. They end up being on panels. They end up getting privileged passes when access to the UN is restricted for most of civil society. We also find billionaires can come, the big philanthropic foundations support them. They're also inside and they're able to influence UN processes. Unfortunately, those who are working closer to an envoy for both the UN and for civil society. Here, civil society concerns enables better civil society participation across the board. So that is a critical outreach function that the UN civil society envoy will have. The second issue that we want to say is that while many of us engage with the UN, different UN agencies and offices have their own predilections, depending on which government is funding that UN agency or office, who happens to be there at a particular time. And there's a lot of asymmetries in how the UN engages civil society. Some do a much better job. We have our friends in UN Women, we have our friends in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, but some, like in the Office of Counterterrorism, don't engage so much as much as they should, perhaps. So again, to overcome these asymmetries and develop best practices across the UN system, we are urging for the appointment of a UN civil society envoy so that there can be better participation across the globe. There's also a bigger challenge that we heard about yesterday, about the rise of anti-rights groups, groups that look like civil society, that engage like civil society, but don't focus on the values that bind us all, the values, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They are outside the market, they're outside the state, they're outside the family, but they may be promoting discrimination, they may be undermining women's sexual and reproductive rights, they may be actually engaging in rhetoric that undermines LGBTQI people's rights. They may be also promoting certain nationalist tendencies or patriarchal or misogynist values. So we need a UN civil society envoy to help the UN navigate through these issues. There are many states that are now trying to learn how to promote government organized NGOs at the UN so that their state supporters can advance their own rhetoric, such as cultural relativism in the upholding of human rights or development with national characteristics. So we have to be able to navigate that, because civil society is essentially independent. Civil society allegiance is to the international human rights framework. So for these reasons, we are calling for the appointment of a UN civil society envoy. It's not a gatekeeping role. It's not to undermine any other group, whether it's the major group's work. It's an additional position that will help the UN outreach to those who don't have the resources to come to New York and Geneva and Paris and Rome and elsewhere. So on this basis, I really want to appeal to us to have this conversation. Unfortunately, the idea of a civil society envoy, along with the UN Parliamentary Assembly, along with the idea of a UN Citizens Initiative, was not included in the declaration that we have from the People's Assembly. So this is a good place to have that conversation. What are the issues? Who is opposing it? In our opinion, those who have privileged access don't want to change it. They want to keep the status quo because they are happy with how things are functioning. They're able to access the UN system. But we are a membership-based alliance. Many of our members and partners are smaller organizations. They have very serious issues accessing the UN. They have very serious challenges with raising some of the issues that are there. And here I just want to end with an experience that I was sharing with Mathri just before. It's Mandeep Tiwana from Civicus. So in 2011, we were engaging the appointment of a UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Now, some colleagues felt that we already had a special rapporteur on the protection of human rights defenders, and perhaps that was a good position. They said we will maybe under that position. We said, no, this is an additional position. We need more special rapporteurs, we need a special on democracy. Democracy is being denigrated in so many ways through populist authoritarianism. We needed a special rapporteur on peaceful assembly and association because there was a commitment within the international human rights framework on the rights. So having an additional position has actually really strengthened civil society rather than the special rapporteur on human rights defenders. In fact, work very closely together to raise issues. And beyond that, the more positions, the more officials we have within the system, as experience shows, we can actually have greater ingress for civil society, especially when our access is being eroded by authoritarian states, by vested private interests who don't want civil society to be at the table because they may oppose certain kinds of economic discourses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Next up, we have Jeff Huffins representing C4UN. And I'd like to hear from you, Jeff, what's been done, what comes next, and also connect the session we're having today with the Global Futures Forum, the UN and Global Governance Innovation, interim People Pact as well, and provide some context, as well as how these campaigns are related to the SDGs.
Thank you so much. Well, we've had such a rich conversation already, so you're right. Now's the time to engage all of us in the room on next steps. And I'll be joined by John Romano of TAP Network, who will also be speaking to SDG 16+. But first, for those of you who do not know, the Coalition for the UN We Need, we are an independent civil society platform dedicated to bringing together CSOs, other stakeholders, the UN and member states to advance the follow-up to the UN 75 Declaration that was adopted in 2020, and our common agenda in preparation for the Summit of the Future, when? In September 2024, really right around the corner. So, you know, I think the new president of the General Assembly, Dennis Francis, when he framed the key challenge of our time as rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, he really hit the nail on the head. This is the theme of this session of the General Assembly. And as we all know in this room, civil society is uniquely placed as a global force to foster greater unity and solidarity between contending governments and peoples. So as you had mentioned, over 3 days this last March, C4UN, we brought together more than 2,000 participants online and some 200 in-person participants here in New York at the Church Center. And for the Futures Forum to finalize and promote an interim People's Pact for the Future as an evolving civil society declaration of some 36 reform proposals. And so this People's Pact was informed by 5 regional future forums, as well as online consultations across 7 thematic tracks that produced and generated several key recommendations. These thematic tracks included development of the SDGs, environmental government, human rights participation, the global digital compact, global economic financial architecture, peace and security, and finally, UN and global governance innovation. And in the thematic track, UN and global governance innovation, many of us in this room participated. And there were 5 key recommendations that were generated in these thematic consultations, and one could say further refined and adopted at the Global Futures Forum. These included, and you've heard many of these ideas already in these presentations. 1, review and strengthen civil society involvement on level of principle. I think that's something we can all. 2, establish an open and transparent selection of an independent Secretary General. You may have heard of the Blue campaign with UNWCI and Pass Blue. This is an ongoing campaign, among others. Finally, yes, create a UNPA, create a UN World Citizens Initiative, and then a call for an Article 109 Charter Review Conference. So we've already heard these ideas, and this is what's on the table. Now, in terms of next steps, and this is where we would really like to invite your participation and comment. First, let's do a quick SWOT analysis of what we've heard so far. Strengths. We have strength in each of our respective campaigns. We have the strength of the unmute campaign on the member state side. So we already have, let's say, a group of friends of at least 52 member states to build. To achieve this. So we need further conversation within our own. Okay. Is there testing? Okay, can you hear me? Okay, there's sound again. Then there's more sound. All right. So we're talking about strengths, we're talking about weaknesses, but opportunities as well. And one of the big opportunities is that the major groups and other stakeholders has been given a mandated role in the summit of the future to participate, engage in the preparatory process of the summit and at the summit itself. So this is a key opportunity for us to take advantage of. And of course, we've heard the threats, okay, the SWOT analysis, right? We have continued member state implacable opposition to civil society participation, both domestically and here at the UN. Oftentimes, civil society is used as a bargaining chip, right, to extract concessions between the G77 and developed countries. So to further develop civil society advocacy going forward in the negotiations of the UN Summit of the Future, Pact for the Future, beginning this fall, we will invite CSO advocates and other stakeholders to continue to engage in debating and refining the Interim People's Pact through further national, regional, and thematic consultations, including global town halls. And as the negotiations of the pact proceeds, we will discuss aligning the Interim People's Pact with the five chapters that had been identified or defined by member states in a decision just passed a couple of weeks ago. Also, we are in consultation with the UN Department of Global Communications and the German Foreign Ministry about the idea of organizing a UN civil society conference next May in Nairobi. So we're hoping to ensure even greater grassroots and global South participation through that, should the funding be finally secured. Stay tuned on that score. So while advocacy consultations in New York are helpful to know the lay of the land and build consensus within civil society around select major reforms, their real work in moving governments must be undertaken in capitals. And this is where the significant decisions are made. So we really look forward to working with all of you to help make this. And just finally, in the draft decision that was recently adopted in the General Assembly, of the 5 chapters, there's a chapter on transforming global governance. So I think this is where a lot of our work will engage these particular campaigns. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks. I want to pass it on to John, if we may.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'll be super brief because Jeff wanted me to talk about the linkages between SDG 16, global governance, our common agenda, Summit of the Future, but I don't think many of us to be sold in this room on where those interlinkages are. But I just want to mention a couple of things related to what Jeff was mentioning around need. Yes, mobilizing here at the global level, I think is important. I think we should recognize that those of us in this room that can be here are very lucky. Most of us understand what's happening across the street, or at least can comprehend the significance of it. I do think there is quite a significant gap. Knowledge, awareness, a lot of jargon terms. For UN has done an amazing job at trying to sensitize all of these really complex processes into ways colleagues at the national level can understand and engage with. And I want to mention just another campaign that we are also, we launched earlier this year called the SDG 16 Now campaign. And it's really an effort along those lines. It's to help sensitize, the jargon, the things happening at the UN to colleagues that work at the national, local level, but also on the other side of things. How do we bring voices from the national and local level to these conversations? And how do we do a bit of storytelling, kind of the rationale? How do we build out the rationale for some of these proposals that we bring to the global level to reform global governance? How do we convince member states that aren't really sold on the significance that civil society can bring into their conversations? How do we put a human face on all these really complex political issues I think is really important for us to think about and building that bridge between the global and national level. So the campaign really hopes to do that and build some of the support for some of these proposals as well. But I think also thinking a little bit about the complexity of the issues that we work on. I mean, we refer to SDG 16 as SDG 16 plus, because we feel that peace and justice, human rights, governance, anti-corruption, legal identity, rule of law, all of these issues within SDG 16 are both enablers and outcomes of sustainable development. And so for us, the question is, how do we kind of break down the silos? I mean, we're often critical of member states for being siloed in their approach, but I think doing a bit of self-reflection, I think as civil society, we can often be siloed as well in some cases. So the campaign is also an effort to kind of break down some of those silos, bring different communities of civil society partners working on these really complex political issues, bringing them together around some common areas for advocacy and mobilization, and how do we bridge what's happening at the global level, utilize the great work that's already being done at the national and local level, and again, how to engage more colleagues through these different campaigns and opportunities. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more information that I can share if you find me throughout the next day and then the coming week ahead. I also have more information here as well, but we'll be deeply engaged in all of these conversations and look forward to helping push some of these proposals as well. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jeff, for that. Okay, we want to try something a little different now. We want to engage all of you in the room. Welcome, come in. And we want to hear your thoughts on this. Jeff talked to us about next steps. What can we do? What are things that the 4 proposals we mentioned, how do they affect you in your daily life? Do they affect you? How? How do they affect the organizations that you're part of? What are some change things that you could do in your organizations after today's sessions, after some different sessions that you have attended in the last couple of days? What can we do collectively to take that forward? So I'm going to just be asking you to, whether you want to just get together where you're sitting right now with the few folks in your direct vicinity and have a little bit of a discussion on this, and then just report back to us. You know, we want to have it a free-flowing discussion, folks in the room, folks online as well. I'll give you an example. I mentioned I'm affiliated with Democracy Without Borders. I also helm an organization called UNPA. It works specifically with children, youth, women, and minorities. Why does this affect me? Well, I have kids. Oh, tech. Oh, yes. Oh, that's tech issue number 5. All right. Okay, they can see me now and hear me. So how does it affect me? Well, I have 2 kids. They are the next generation. I work with women. I want everybody to voice in what happens, not just the privileged few that Maggie alluded to earlier. Everyone needs to have a voice. What happens in our society? What happens in our daily lives? It won't happen, not change until we all collectively come together and figure out in our amazing organization we're part of, how do we make this happen? So, in a few minutes, we have going to get out of here at 12:30 on the dot. In about 15 minutes, I'm going to ask everybody to start giving me some, take some time to think about it. How does it affect you? How does it affect your organization? What can you do about this? What can we do collectively to bring this in and make some change going forward? Okay, so spend a few minutes thinking about that. And then the mic will be passed around. You online, have a little think about this, and then I will call upon you guys just to unmute yourself to share as well.
Sorry, unfortunately, we won't be able to have people unmute because the session has been like hacked. And so we're going to just have to let people chat right in the chat, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. we'll do it from there. All right. We don't know who's advocacy. Otherwise. Yep.
profit from the 20 minutes.
Okay, everybody, you can just start summarizing your thoughts together. We'll reconvene in 2 minutes. So you've got 2 minutes to just summarize your thoughts together. Thank you. Okay, everybody, if I can ask you all to gather back in your original positions again. And I'm going to start just asking you to share, and I'll pass over the mic for you to do so. So I'm going to just start in that back corner there. Excuse me. And I'm going to hand you the mic. Is this, you're all one group, correct? Oh, okay, perfect. So I'm going to just have you guys start with, how does it affect you? All of the above, yeah. How does it affect you? What can we do going forward? So, okay, you can share.
We can share the reporting back responsibilities. So we had a few different types of responses. So some of us shared how some of these concerns affect us in our day-to-day lives and some of the projects that we've done at the grassroots level and trying to think about maybe action within a high school or in a particular neighborhood. There were concerns about how do we function in a system where the very democratic principles that we're thinking about are not necessarily reflected across the street. And then how do you incorporate the concerns of individuals at the grassroots who function in a very different way with society within the UN system that already knows how the system functions? So how do you kind of rectify those tensions that exist? But also knowing that we're facing an institution that's not representative of that's really controlled by a handful of countries. So that's not democratic in principle. So there's kind of a tension there. I don't know if there's also something else you wanted to share that I may have missed.
Oh, so that was what the conversation we had. One point that I wanted to say, but it was, so there is funding going on. There are projects which are going on to implement the SDGs. I think the problem is that no one's really auditing it. No one's saying that, it's the funding goes in a manner that it's efficient and that we get outcomes. So there has to be some mechanism to check the outcomes, course correct when that things go wrong, or just plan and process the whole thing out, because there is funding going on. It's just that it's not giving us the outcome we want to.
Well, over the last few days, I've just become incredibly excited about the SDGs in action, the manifestation, the implementation of the SDGs at the local level. Finally, local to global, finally the framework that we've been looking for all these years to get this UN anything to matter to ordinary people. Now we can have the SDGs as a curriculum element in every school in the world. UN is behind one. And then the kids can doing group projects and manifest in their community or on their campus. And one of the goals you want to name. And finally, this thing about manifesting the SDGs locally is the work for the younger generation. Pay young people to do that. And that gives you this kind of motivation to get the money together because, you know, you need those services actually delivered. No one's going to argue, really. We'd never have any way to, nobody's getting paid to do that, to take care of people's needs. That isn't the job. The corporations don't do that kind of work, but we need to do it.
Thank you for all of that, group one. I'm going to pass over to, which is the group here? You've got all of you or the group? Okay, you guys are one group? Okay, but you can join. We're all inclusive here. All right. You guys, are you part of the next group? Okay. So same question to you. I'm going to ask if it's possible to keep your responses to 2 minutes, so we've got time to get everybody to share their thoughts. So who's our spokesperson? You are?
Okay. Hi. Good morning. My point is that the CSOs that are within the countries, the local CSOs are not represented. I agree with that. And we're happy that we're here. We're from the Philippines and involved in the discussions in the SDG 16 and other SDGs. And we thank you for supporting some of our issues. But at the same time, we would like the UN to really push for something for the Philippines. So we know what's happening there. And hopefully our local CSOs and international CSOs can help us moving forward with our issues. I think my colleague will also. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was also a latecomer. But one thing that our organization CPD has been pushing for was actually the issue of a global governance mechanism. Because the thing is, we've already had a number of global commitments, but most of them are non-binding. So sometimes it's an option for countries to adopt the commitments. And worse, if they adopt it, it's just lip service. And then the development is not genuine. It's not actually going to the people. So in the 4 initiatives, I think there must be a space for the UN to ensure a global governance mechanisms to ensure the implementation, the coherence, the alignment of a number of commitments from different bodies, international bodies, to ensure that whatever is discussed at the global level is cascaded, it is implemented at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move to our next person, I'm just going to ask if we can just read from our chat. I think they've been right in. No, you might just sort of seeing if you could. Thank you.
Okay, it says global governance needs to be revolutionized and acknowledge the value of scientifically based collective intelligence approaches in order to deal with multiplying catastrophic and existential risks we face. Someone else says that good global governance is a hugely complicated intellectual task. Humanity needs to join and connect all the dots and then join all the dots of all the possible solutions that that is what they're working on as part of the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum. And someone else has mentioned that in terms of what we can do as civil society, we need to be endorsing and supporting campaigns in active ways.
Thank you for that, Zara and folks online. I'm going to go back in the room now. So we have this group here. Next, I haven't met Lucy. Okay. I'm going to put my phone to you.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Veronica Sabah, the founder of a nonprofit organization called United Voices for Peace. And we very much work with the model of citizens diplomacy. So we were debating, I was explaining the way our organization works, and it works very much on the basis of participatory democracy. We have heard some examples here, and we very much believe that this is the future of government. So we're very interested in following all on that, regardless of how we implement. So what is the concrete action that we're taking? But definitely, I mean, people's power, and we've seen many local initiatives, for instance, in Spain. I am from Spain, so we believe that it works very well, for instance, on the adoption of budgets, the budget. People want to vote on what, where their money is used for. So this is something that is being implemented, and I'll be interested in knowing if, for instance, your initiative here links somehow also with some local authorities or something, or it just tackles global problems. And then we debated, for instance, the role of the global society representative or envoy, because we acknowledge the fact that, for instance, right now we have 1 week of debate at the General Assembly, which presents 193 unilateral statements, mostly by governments presenting only one way of their local realities. And we believe that maybe an envoy could give a different input and a different view on the situation on some countries, where notably some CSOs, so some civil society representatives, will give a different view and a counterbalanced view, more realistic maybe sometimes, and maybe trigger a real debate, not only a unilateral presentation of a unilateral view on the situation in a given country.
Much. Anyone else from this side? There we go.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Zahra Saleh. I'm a founder and executive director of ICAO. It's a youth-led youth-saving organization back in Tanzania. So what we have been discussing here, and what I'll add on it, is how I have been feeling the burden of all the information I've been receiving since attending all these sessions. The burden is the representation of young people, but when you talk of representation of young people, you also want to know how many girls and women are in that group of representation of young people, because whatever young people are missing, the effect for girls and young women is twice as much. So for us, what I have been sharing is how, when I am privileged to be here to understand this level of discussion and complexity in it, but then it's how do I catch with this move at the time, get back home, and to all the generation of young people, make sure they have the capacity to come. When they get that table, they have the capacity to actually unpack all the complexity. We're now speaking of UN and how it's not efficient, but for me, and understanding the group of young people back, it's like all we know now is UN, the building, and how beautiful it is, how technology is in the glasses, and it's all at the level of the building now. So me thinking of them and being here privileged, hear all this complexity, it reflects me like, oh, how we catch up with this, and how do we get back and make sure they all catch up with this, because this is what should be done now. But then what are the efforts to make sure it's not just about what should be done, but how do we collect everyone there back home And as we are speaking as the citizen, the world citizen, we have to think of how we include young people, because these are the people who are going to carry on all of this that we are planning to do. And I can feel that the representation is very, very small, and that feels like a very big burden for me. Thank you. But also, a partner here speak of how do we keep the M&E aspect of things, because we have seen efforts that have worked, and how we used to understand the UN and what it does, especially on the angle of peace building and peacekeeping. But we've seen countries like Sudan and others that troops are doing things and we are here, the young people wondering, we're just expecting the way we understood UN, how it's getting things. When something happened, they walk in and they change things, but those changes at our level we can't see. And so we how the things are being done, and they are not happening as how we used to understand. What does that mean? We expect for UN to work in Sudan and change things, to work in Libya and change things, but it's not doing that. So yes, for sure, what is happening in UN now is not sufficient, but then how, as we are working in this, are we integrating the M&E part of things? Because then we don't have to reach at some point where we have covered stuff, but they are also not, they're all hanging. They're not happening the way we want them to happen. Thank you.
Okay, this group. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, apologies. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Durga Soup from Nepal. Actually, I'm always privileged to be, part of these kinds of conversation and events, and I learn a lot from these kinds of discussion and events. And then always this is the global platform, and I learned global experience and global issues and global idea, which I want to localize that idea and experience in my country, because I'm a voice of most marginalized people, women especially in my country, and the SDG is the most important for my community, for my country, where I'm working, and especially what we have been focusing on, how to localize the SDG, because the people who should not be left on behind, those are not aware about these things. So we have to localize, we have to educate, we have to aware to them. That level we have been working. And another level is the government should have accountable and responsible, towards, how to, internalize and how we can implement the SDG at the local level. So that is that level, we are pushing to our government to implement the SDG, the focus on the marginalized group, especially goal 1, 2, 3, 4 are very important for the Dalit and marginalized community in my country, especially goal 5, which is related to women. And then within the women, there is the intersectionality issue. That's why we are working on very good. And then goal 16 also equally important, and 10 also we are working on that issue. And so that's why I learn a lot, and then I really want to localize my learning, what I learned from here, which I want to implement this in at the local level. Thank you.
And anyone who doesn't have a chance to say everything, we want to stay in touch later, and I'll come back. Just a really quick one. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. So we were a pair. So I'll use 30 seconds maybe to describe what Miles shared with me, and he can do the same for what I shared with him. But my name is Rebecca Shute. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens for Global Solutions. So Miles, is this okay? Can you hear me? Great. So Miles represents the Malala Fund, and what his organization does is work on a pilot basis in several countries with girls to empower their voices for advocacy at the local level, at civil society, and also here at the UN. And I think one of the fellows is with us. One of the previous guests is that a lot of initiatives that claim to empower young women and girls do so in a not linked to change over time and linked to the institutions that have going beyond their view. And we also spoke to the fact that there seemed to be a chasm between the change and the advocacy that's done at the local level and over here across the street. And so initiatives such as citizenship initiative or UN Parliamentary Assembly, some of these groups can hopefully provide connective tissue for individuals, such as girls around the world whose voices are not normally heard in the corridors of power.
And just what can also be done is that in future, events like UNGA, for instance, before the actual celebrations happen, they put a small
treaty, every charter, every constitution within it implies an economic order. And for us to actually pay attention to that, right now we have an economic order that says we're going to grow and grow and grow and grow our way out of all of the problems that we have, to actually create a working group that would examine this relationship in terms of the economic democracy, political democracy, and social democracy.
Thank you. My name is Nakadia and I am from India. I think we have to be a little bit critical of the political economy of the UN, right? It's the accountability. Government's accountability and UN's accountability, right? And there's just no clarity of how that's done. There's the system of shadow reporting. In India, the shadow reporting, God knows, I think it was 4-5 years back. So I think we really have to think about political economy of the UN, and we have to think about whether democratizing the UN is really the solution, right? And will it really work? Are we really investing our energies into something that may or may not work? Instead, in countries like ours, where the political environment is so challenging, can we think of ways within the country where resources and where some of these goals that have been set up internationally are more localized and efforts are more localized, and development, progress, gender equity is working at that level. We have to be a little critical in terms of whether by focusing on democratizing the UN, we are taking away the focus from the real issues on the ground, and whether we really need to invest a lot of energy there, because we'll have accountability frameworks again, we'll have indicators, and then governments will report on that, but how much of civil society voices will go into that? So just a little bit of a cynical voice there.
Thanks very much. And we want to hear all the voices, and I think this is very helpful for them to do that. So,
hi everyone. My name is Aisha Machani. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this rainy morning. I'm just going to tell you a bit more about an initiative that the think tank I'm here with today, ISWE Foundation, worked on, which I think would be provides a kind of concrete way we can take forward some of the kind of suggestions that were put in the interim People's Pact. So in 2021, ISWE Foundation, along with a network of organizations from around the world, ran a global citizens assembly for COP26. It brought together people from around the world to discuss how we can solve the climate and ecological crisis in a fair and equitable way. And the result was a people's declaration that put forward recommendations for governments to consider at COP26. And this was absolutely a prototype for the Global Citizens Assembly, and we're kind of very interested in seeing how we can take forward this initiative, how it can support some of the proposals that have been put forward in the Interim People's Pact. So if you'd like to know more about it, you can come and speak to me outside after the event, or please check it out at globalassembly.org. Thanks so much.
Just one supplement to that is because we're from this like global citizen deliberation movement, and just to say what's really interesting is that I've been working on stuff like 20, 30 years, and there's a mass movement of local, national, global infrastructure. But I thought the lady's point before was excellent. Like, we can't use the word democracy to operate in most countries around the world anymore. Although I am a democracy practitioner, we are not able to do that. It means we are not given a license to operate. So there's this whole big movement of basically galvanizing citizens to meet the crises, health, climate, etc. we face. And then there's this conversation, which is also this important advocacy conversation at UN level, really trying to ensure the UN is true to its original conception. And what I'm struck by is these worlds are totally, I've never been to one of these meetings before. Never in my life. I've heard about it, but I've never been to this. And there's these two worlds that are really quite separate. And what we would love to facilitate is maybe bringing them together.
All right, we're actually just over time. Do you have like 10-second? Just 10 seconds.
Hi, I'm with the United Nations Association. I mean, of course, we are all for democratizing the UN, but we also need funding. You know, like our problem is finding funds for the governments are the one funding UN to run. So in any restructuring, we also need to fund the UN to run.
And on that note, thank you all for coming. I'm going to allow just our panelists, if you want to make any closing remarks before we officially let everyone go. Yep.
So one thing I was struck that there's so much interest in this room for UN reform. So I think that's really positive. And the thought I just want to leave us with is that, you know, when the UN was founded in 1945, it was a revolutionary idea. And it was a work in progress. And so if today some of these ideas seem, you know, challenging given the state of multilateralism, we need to continue to work on them, and we continue to not lose our optimism.
Exactly. Is democratizing the UN an illusion? I mean, this was provocative. We have not a second UN, or we would start from scratch and build a new one, but that is as well an illusion. So we have to work with what we have. And it is a hard work. It's a marathon. It will not be easy, but I think you have to have that vision that the world can be better, and the world governance can be better than it is today. So that's the reason why we come here. And to connect grassroots with the UN is the big challenge, how to close the gap. I liked your citizens' diplomacy. Yeah, having a grassroots sustainability partnerships could as well be an element among the many networking that we are doing. So thank you very much. It was really amazing what came as energy and as power from this audience.
I was just to say we spend more time doing it than talking about it.
I saw Nadura writing on her hand. I was going to ask her if she needed a piece of paper, but no. I mean, this has been great. If you enjoy this, please let's continue the conversation. We invite everyone to continue the conversation through C4UN, but through all of our respective networks. We look forward to working with you now into the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And anyone who hasn't signed the sign-in sheet and wants to stay in touch with us, and we want to hear your voices, please do so on your way out. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.